Thank you. Thank you to Massimo Stefania for allowing us here, and to all of Pet Levrieri for the marvellous work they do. I'm honoured to be here today to represent Cage Northwest and speak on behalf of all the dogs bred for the racing industry. Greyhounds are suffering and dying every day due to the supply and demand of an industry that exploits them on so many levels. Dogs that are old, slow or injured are rendered useless once they are no longer able to earn a profit. They are at high risk of death from the very moment they are born. The word retired is not applicable in an industry where they are treated as disposable, and so few survive due to injuries, the overbreeding, lack of homes and limited resources in the rescue world. The dogs they call champions are not exempt from the suffering. One dog in particular, Copeland's Rocket, was until recently kept in a cage for several years by a ground trainer in England. When Louise Eccles abandoned her kennels, the dog she had hoarded for 6 years was taken to rescue, but it was too late. He gasped for breath and died within hours of being let out of the cage. The kennel hands and the vet who served these kennels all accepted their wages, but allowed Copeland Rocket to rot away in that cage, making them as responsible for Rocket's death as Louise herself. We were told Louise was very attached to Rocket, quite confusing when explained, as though it was a humane and caring relationship rather than one of abuse. Copeland Rocket had serious health problems and was forced to exist rather than live. This was a classic case of a trophy dog, a dog that serves a ground trainer's ego to exist as a memory rather than a life. We know this is just one case out of millions, but our point here is how many people will stay silent for a small wage on the back of greyhound abuse. Regardless of any professional code of conduct or morals, the corruption lies deep, involving those who earn a wage from the self-regulated governing body at the core of the industry to those on the surface, the kennel hands and the vets who pertain to choose silence. To ignore abuse is to participate in abuse. From the racing industry transporters to the airlines that fly them to their deaths overseas, they are all complicit in the exploitation of these innocent dogs. Regulation, no matter how strict, will never prevent the cruelty, because the industry depends on the overbreeding of dogs. They cull puppies that don't make the grade and supply and demand to the UK, where 80% of the dogs are imported from Ireland. We have a major problem due to the overbreeding of greyhounds, and it cannot be remedied while ground racing exists. There are more surplus greyhounds destroyed today than all the stray dogs put together in the UK. The fact is, and always will be, that it is impossible to rehome all the greyhounds. In the UK, we have bags races, which means bookmakers afternoon ground service. The bookmakers depend on bags trainers. Bags trainers generally have large amounts of dogs, often starting with around 50. The trainer is paid a fee for every dog they enter the race. Even if they don't get placed, it proves to be a regular income for the trainer and provides a steady flow of races for the bookmakers to broadcast. The bookmakers are predominantly responsible for the overbreeding and hoarding of dogs via the bags trainers, which leads to the most serious of welfare issues in kennelling. While a bags trainer may have around 80 dogs, only around 50 of them, 50% of them, will be actively racing. The industry has its own rehoming programme, which entails a long waiting list, usually around 6 months. Meaning the ground trainers are often persuaded to accept money from the industry for boarding their own surplus dogs. And this leads to the major problem of hoarding. Sadly, we are referring to the ground trainers who prefer not to kill their dogs. Instead, they themselves are faced with the major problem due to overbreeding. Dogs will often exist in squalid conditions, with few or no staff to attend to them, and only the very basics of water and shelter. Some trainers will have full-time jobs, leaving the dogs for up to 20 hours per day without care. The bookmakers are not going to cut ties with the racing industry while they have such large vested interest. Those supportive of the ground racing industry often claim it can be better regulated. They have had 90 years to regulate it and still unable to. How many more years do we need to wait? How many more lives will be lost through false promises? The fact is, the cruelty will continue until greyhound racing ends. The industry is in decline, and significantly so. Over the past decade, we must end the greyhound racing industry, but not without taking important measures to ensure the safety net is applied to protect all the dogs. We must initially block the possibility of greyhound exports and ensure that there is a plan for rehoming all the dogs. There are 15,000 greyhounds in circulation in the UK at present, and it will be impossible to rehome this amount of dogs. If greyhound racing was abolished overnight in 2016, therefore, a ban implemented by a 4-year phase-out of greyhound racing with no further breeding of greyhounds would allow all the dogs to be rehomed safely. Additionally, people employed by the racing industry would have plenty of time to retrain for new employment. With all this in mind, it is highly unlikely we will ever gain a ban in the UK due to the amount of money the government earns in taxes. But maybe there'll be hope if the ground racing industry further declines in the future. Cage Northwest maintain a realistic view in terms of what can be done to combat the cruelty. Now I'll tell you a little bit about us. Cage was formed in 2012 and founded by my partner Rita. I'll take you back to the previous year and explain how we became so involved. In 2011, we attended a protest at Bellevue Groundstad in Manchester. That was the very first stadium to open in 1926. When we arrived, there was 4 protesters. The placards they held were not visible and their voices unheard, through the crowds of people entering the tracks. The following week we went back armed with a megaphone. We turned the volume up to its highest. It was time the protesters to be heard. In the following weeks we began standing in town centres armed with just our megaphone and very little knowledge about the politics of ground racing. Some people will pass sneering at us, but others began throwing their spare pennies into our megaphone case. We were determined to make people aware of the cruelty. Each week, we spent our spare time on the streets, chatting to people and chanting "Greyhounds, you bet they die" through the megaphone. We saved all our pennies up and eventually made enough funds to renew the banners at the Bellevue Groundstad in protest. The protesters saw how good the banners looked and began contributing towards the additional ones. After several stalls, we collected enough money to print our first batch of leaflets. I decided that the protest needed an identity, so I called it SDBV, Shut Down Bellevue. I began the SDBV Facebook page and exceeded my expectations. With thousands of people joining over the oncoming months, we have floods of new protesters. And at times, we had around 50 to 60 people attend. One evening after the track protest, we were driving through the busy city centre of Manchester. We drove past an amazing backlit billboard. The most were advertising leading businesses. Rita said, "Wouldn't it be a dream come true if we could reach people with awareness using billboards? If it works for leading businesses, then it can work for the dogs." Just weeks later, we purchased a billboard trailer and had banners made to fit. We named it the Race to Death Tour. We towed it to several busy locations for around 12 months. On one occasion, we crossed paths with the industry's own big dog limousine. The racing industry had invested a fortune on a stretch limousine with a purpose-built, giant-sized imitation greyhound on the rooftop. We followed it in awe. we used the megaphone to tell the public what this vehicle was representing: cruelty, exploitation and death of greyhounds. The limousine driver blushed and made a poor attempt to do a U-turn in the road. Mid-panic, he forgot the length of the monster-sized vehicle he was driving, losing all control of his chauffeur skills and getting the vehicle stuck. We had our fun, filming him while he swayed back and forth, stuck in a moment of pure embarrassment. We went from strength to strength, and within the following 12 months, and by April 2012, Rita had founded the campaign group Cage Northwest. We decided to expand to new levels and devote our lives to the greyhounds that were losing theirs. Our work since 2012 is second nature to us. We continuously raise mass awareness in high traffic areas of major cities where ground stadiums are located, expressing the cruelty of greyhounds attached to the racing industry and using strong images and text. We use super-side posters on buses, sky banners, spectacular backlit billboards, each project targeting hundreds of thousands of people. We strive to build on publications in newspapers and magazines to advise people of the cruelty attached to greyhound racing. Dogs Today magazine have been massively supportive. We have two amazing members of our team, Karen and Rachel, who create public events. They often include greyhounds to participate in fun events to attract the public and show them that greyhounds really do make the best companions. We attend places of education to meet with young people and to help them understand the implications of gambling and attending ground tracks. We supply the UK and Irish campaigners with free graphic materials that they can use to protest at the tracks. We distribute tens of thousands of leaflets every year, and we promote ground rescue wherever possible. We expose the cruelty within ground racing at any cost. We have team members who recently intercepted 24 dogs transiting through England to be exported to Macau for use at the Canidrome, a track with 100% kill rate. We took video footage and applied pressure and hit the media. The dogs were later turned away by staff at Heathrow Airport to head back to Ireland. This cost the ground trainer a lot of expense and gave us the realisation that we have team members who are highly dedicated and willing to put their own necks on the line when they're confronted with aggressors. We intend to continue our work as a team until the racing industry has its final day. Thank you.